I was approached by a good friend of mine asking for a basic overview of Warhammer 40,000 and the lore therein. When I returned about 7 hours later with 47 pages of an essay, she received it surprisingly well, considering the Cheeto dust on it and Mountain Dew stains, but nevertheless it was received well. So I'm just going to record it here, and we'll see how it goes. So here's the thing about Warhammer 40,000. It's a tabletop war game. So lots of little plastic guys, measuring tapes, rule books that make D&D look like preschool coloring sheets, in-depth strategy, etc. It's enjoyed by the type of nerds that make gamers look hygienic and good at talking to women. 40K started way back in the 80s, when Games Workshop looked around and said, "Men are having too much sex and deodorant is selling too well. We should fix that." Or, more realistically, "These autists are bored. Let's give them something to argue over." With this in mind, it's important to always remember that everything that pertains to 40K is always in service of selling more little guys. If it doesn't sell little guys, it doesn't happen. If it happens and doesn't make sense, think to yourself, can this theoretically sell more little guys? If the answer is yes, then there you go. So what is 40K when people refer to it as such? 40K is a setting. It's got mad lore, but it's not a story per se. Imagine a painting. Now, I can show you a lovely landscape, and you can appreciate the colors and composition and whatnot. And I can also, separately, show you a painting of two people, holding hands so sweetly. But overlay them and have the landscape towering over the couple, and both are elevated for their juxtaposition. The majesty and depth of the landscape is given scale by the size of the people, and the couple's relationship is made more beautiful for the context. 40K is a bit like this. Understanding the lore will elevate all the little vignettes and stories that are set within it, as they're made more poignant with understanding the gravity of the setting. 40K was originally made as a satire of fascism and warlike tendencies in Western culture. Ironic coming from the Brits, but, everyone is always fighting, and everything sucks all the time, and it's awful forever. 40K literally coined the term grimdark. If you think it's bad, it's worse. Always. There are no good guys, and thus the moments of heroism, courage, or kindness shine brighter for it. You may have heard the line, "In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only war." This is both literal in the setting and the thesis of the whole setting. Humanity fucked itself by being dicks to a prime degree, and now the galaxy is fucking them straight back. There are multiple factions at war across the Milky Way galaxy, which is the primary area that 40K takes place within, and multiple sub-factions within each that are always fighting each other. See Little Guy Thesis. This is the reason for all the tabletop war games. They fit within the setting because pretty much anyone can fight anyone else at any time, and it can, broadly, make sense. You tracking with all this? You following? No? Good. If it did, I'd be concerned with your personal autism levels. Let's get into the actual lore. So, the main thing to understand to begin gaining a foothold in the setting is the warp, the Immaterium, the Sea of Souls, the Empyrean, Chaos. These are all names for the same thing. And what is the warp? I am so glad you asked. The warp is an alternate dimension that is overlaid over the Materium, or material realm, our dimension, real space. Pick your term of choice. Think the Upside Down from Stranger Things, or the cognitive realm from the Cosmere, or anything else that has a spiritual realm or alternate dimension, and you'll be reasonably close. The thing about the warp here is that it is the realm of thought, emotion, and souls. Every living thing has a presence in the warp. If you and I sat across from each other and looked into the warp, our souls would appear in the warp. Also, if we were in a crazy battle full of raging barbarians, all of their souls would appear in the warp as well. And, perhaps most importantly, in that battle, all the anger and rage of those barbarians would begin to coalesce into a single entity that, if given enough anger and rage and time, might even gain sentience, becoming what might be called a warp entity, or perhaps demon. This makes sense? It's the place of souls and thoughts and emotions, and if there's enough souls with thoughts and emotions all in the same place for long enough, they might be able to think / believe / feel something into existence that has its own sense of self outside of the people who created it in the first place. For my Cosmere homies, if you and I got into a brawl for 5 years straight, there's a chance that our anger might show up as an anger sprint and kill us both. Now, that's the main focus point of the setting beyond, the whole last Milky Way galaxy. That's what makes it unique. We'll come back to the warp a lot, and you need to get that it's this alternate dimension that's low-key hell and also the place that all souls are tied to. Generally speaking, within the setting, faster-than-light travel takes place through the warp. If you can enter the warp at a certain point, you can exit it at a different point in the galaxy, and it often doesn't exactly line up. Classic wormhole sci-fi stuff. You just pass through literal, actual hell full of demons to get there. Don't worry about it, this is a totally normal and healthy thing for squishy humans to do. Alright, check in. Are you tracking? Give me a sign you're breathing and not catching autism from all the Cheeto dust in the air. Now let's talk about factions. There's a bunch of factions that were made as the main groups to fight. We've got humans, super oppressed and fascist, the Imperium of Man. Humans-ish, turning themselves into robots because technology is cool, the Adeptus Mechanicus. Demons / shitty people who like hell, the Forces of Chaos. Space elves, few and skilled, dying and scared, Eldar. Space elves but BDSM Cenobites, Drukhari. Cranky old men Egyptian robots, the Necron dynasties. Space bug swarm eating everything in sight, the Tyrannid swarm. Space communist alien / mecha enjoyers, the Tau Collective. And space British football hooligans, the Orcs. So 40k is a lot. Like, a fuck of a lot. The lore is nested fractally. The more you learn about a faction, generally speaking, the more you like them. There's so much that there's literally multiple 100 hours long podcasts just doing overviews. There's hundreds of novels set in this universe. And that's not even touching all the intentional gaps left in canon for people to make homebrew lore for their armies to play on tabletop. Generally, the best way to start once you have the idea of the warp down is to start to engage with one of the factions that sounds kinda interesting. Then we can talk about sub-factions and how they interact with the other factions, and then as you get more comfortable with your main faction, you can explore the others. Now, I'll drop a super basic timeline so you can get a very, very minimal idea of what all is going on in the lore. Our story opens with the Necron tier. Yes, this will turn into the Necron later. And their war in heaven with the Old Ones. Space frogs, non-existent in current time. They lost. The Necron tier were super sick all the time because their son gave them cancer, so they asked the Old Ones for help. The Old Ones told the Necron tier to suck it, so the Necron tier went to war with them. The Necron tier made a deal with some local gods, the C'tan, to help them kick the shit out of the Old Ones. The C'tan said, "Yeah, sure, no problem. Just gotta sacrifice yourselves for us." So the Necron tier said, "Alright," and did, giving up their souls and bodies, turning into these metal robot things called the Necrons, becoming basically zombies in the process. The C'tan are dicks and tricked them. Then the C'tan kicked the shit out of the Old Ones. The Old Ones got scared and dropped single-cell organisms all over the galaxy to try to make new races to fight on their side. This is the Eldar/Drukhari, the Orcs, and humanity. But we didn't evolve fast enough, so they lost. Then the Necron beat the shit out of the C'tan for tricking them. The Necrons took over and ran the whole galaxy for a very long time, but then they got all sleepy from fighting the Eldar and took a big nap. They went to sleep for a long time in tomb worlds across the galaxy. Then the Eldar got good enough tech, so they took over the galaxy while the Necron took the big nap. But they made too good of a society, no scarcity, and so everyone was bored. So, frankly, they fucked around a ton and went full Cenobite on themselves, basically inventing the Drukhari. Remember how I said lots of souls all together could make an entity in the warp? Yeah, the Eldar fucked and sucked and ate and played and killed so much for like a couple thousand years, they literally made a god of indulgence and pleasure and excess. Their name is Slaanesh, and they're the fourth chaos god. We'll talk about them later. When Slaanesh was born in the warp, they killed like 90+% of the Eldar in an instant, and ate their souls, so there's only a few of those damn space elves left running around trying to not die and get ate. The Drukhari are still fucking and sucking to try to keep Slaanesh fed without getting ate themselves. The Orcs are just happy to fight all the fucking time. Fungus dudes that live to fight, and even if they die, it was a good fight, so hooray. They're basically impossible to get rid of, because even if you kill one of them, they grow back from spores. They're honestly funny as shit, and we can talk more about them. Suffice to say, they're a constant ongoing mosh pit, and they're having a riot. Now, humanity grows up after the Eldar made their new fucked up baby. They're led by the Emperor of Mankind. He's a 15-foot tall, immortal dude that a bunch of wizards made in a brain vat to be the best guy ever. Except he sucks as a dad, and that screws humanity in so many ways you don't even know. He led humanity to the stars, and it was our turn to own the galaxy, except he made us all hyper-techno-fascist, and every xeno race we encountered we slaughtered. So now the only ones left are the ones we couldn't kill, and they are very mad about that and are trying to kill us right back. The Imperium of Man is currently the biggest faction in the galaxy, but it's rotting inside, corrupt, and collapsing slowly while they try to fend off all the other races that are attacking them. The Tyranids are space bugs that came from the great intergalactic cold in their giant hive ships. They jump on a planet, eat everything down to bedrock, then they move on to the next one. They are some hungry fellas. The Mechanicus is based on Mars instead of Earth, and they're the delightful toaster fuckers. They like technology so much they give up their flesh to become the blessed machine. You may have heard the soundbite, "From the moment I understood the weakness of my flesh, it disgusted me." That's the Mechanicus. They wear red robes, they worship technology, and they make all the guns, bullets, mechs, machines, AC units, computers, etc. for the Imperium. The Tau are what fascists think communists are. It's a super stratified society that serves, quote, the greater good, unquote. They're the only faction currently that might ask if you want to join them before dropping a railgun shot between your eyes. They're as close as we're going to get to something approximating good guys. They are still very much not great. Let's talk about chaos. So the warp has all these little entities and demons that pop up because they're manifestations of concentrations of thoughts and emotions. Yeah? Well, there's 4 big ones. The Chaos Gods, the Ruinous Powers. Everything in this setting is nuanced, so we'll save details for later. The 4 big ones are Nurgle, Tzeentch, Khorne, and Slaanesh. Nurgle, the Plague Father, the Master of Pestilence, is the god of stasis, stagnation, decay, pestilence, plague, rot, disease, and acceptance. Picture a pool of stagnant water, chock full of algae, mosquitoes, and maybe a dead rat. Grandfather Nurgle loves you and accepts you just as you are. He wants you to enjoy his gifts. Don't ask why his gifts involve plagues rotting you out from the inside and making crazy fucking mutations grow out of your body. Nurgle is the friend who says, skipping therapy is self-care. Nurgle will let us stay in and watch Netflix instead of, putting on pants or going out with our friends. Tzeentch, the changer of ways, the weaver of all fates, is the god of mischief, trickery, cunning, plans, change, and intellect. The great game and the shifting mound are all him. He just wants you to change and grow and move, and also he wants to trick you and fuck with you. He and Nurgle are diametrically opposed. Now Khorne, Lord of Rage, the Blood God, is the god of blood and slaughter and war and death, but also of honor. Perhaps you've heard blood for the blood gods, skulls for the skull throne. Yeah, that's this guy. Khorne will fuck you up, but he will never stab you in the back. He wants to fight and win and crush, kill, maim, burn, but if you kill him back by beating him straight up, he's okay with it. Finally, we have Slaanesh, she who thirsts, prince of pleasure. We've kind of covered them already. They're the god of excess and indulgence. Music? Crank that shit to 25 out of 10. Sex? We're fucking with knife blades. Food? Nah, we're eating thrice digested shit. Art? We're making instruments out of still living bodies and playing symphonies on their tendons. So there are elements of each faction that fall to or choose to serve the forces of chaos in exchange for powers as they engage in the Great Game, which is the gods fighting with each other trying to gain more influence. Now that these gods exist, anything that falls within their realm feeds them power. Like, say you get in a crazy fight and rage flows through you, Khorne gets a little stronger. But if you get all sneaky beaky and outthink your shitty coworker and get him fired, Tzeentch likes that and gets a little stronger. That's the Great Game. Trying to get more people to act in their benefit. Alright, let's talk a little bit about the Imperium. It's the biggest faction and, generally speaking, the most popular. So the Emperor of Mankind. It all starts with him. We touched on it a little bit, that he is genetically created to essentially be the best human being ever. Most powerful psyker, the biggest, the strongest, the best strategist, and specifically, the best genetic engineer. He made 20 sons using his genetic material to lead his Space Marines. He makes these 20 sons and then takes each of their genetics to make the Marines by taking normal folks and modifying them with new organs and genetic materials to make them 9-foot-tall super soldiers with 2 hearts that can literally punch through a tank. The Space Marines are the poster boys of the setting. If you've seen any art of 40k anywhere, there's a 90% chance you're looking at Space Marines. They're the big, chunky, armored guys. There's tons of different little chapters of them, but all that matters is that they're these massive super soldiers that were literally surgically modified normal people that have been put through crazy training and screwed up in the head so much they don't know anything but duty and kill Xenos. And you may be saying to yourself, am I supposed to think they're silly, sad, or badass? And the answer is yes. They're goofy. Like, yeah, you can't even move your shoulders in that armor. And also sad, like, man, I bet you wish you could have had a normal life. You've already outlived your family, let alone having to watch your brothers die in battle. Also, they're dope as fuck, ripping apart enemies in crazy last stands all over the place. It's a satire. There's plenty to pull from. Alright, we're doing another mental check. Where are we at? You okay? Let's talk a little bit about the Mechanicus now. So, after humanity grew into its golden age of technology, read super good tech, they made AI, let them spread across the galaxy, they ruled everything, and things were good, by techno-fascist standards, following the Emperor and whatnot. After all that, came the Age of Strife. The Age of Strife was when a bunch of warp storms and portals showed up across the galaxy and cut off a bunch of planets from each other. They couldn't communicate or travel between themselves because of all the warp fuckery. This warp fuckery, by the way, was the precursor to the birth of Slaanesh. This was the part of the Eldar party where things were getting real weird. Now, Mars at the time was the first real Forge world, which was a fancy way of saying it's a massive planet-sized factory. They made some stuff. I'm talking walking mechs the size of skyscrapers, with guns that could flatten a planet like a cue ball on a grinding wheel. The tech priests of Mars got a raging hard-on for technology and began to replace their fleshy bits with machinery to upgrade themselves. Why have hands when you could have Dr. Octopus tentacles? And if you got brain fog, have an extra CPU plugged into your head. Problem solved. Congrats. They began to worship the machine god and look for the Omnissiah. Read the god that makes technology work, and the Omnissiah who's the manifestation of said. Think cultural depictions of the Christian God and Jesus. You're pretty close. Now, after the Age of Strife ceased, the Emperor of Mankind rocked up to Mars and said, "What up? I'm back. You guys want to make some crazy shit for me?" And the Mechanicus started rattling off in binary for a second before going, "Oh right, shit, you speak English. Yeah, we'd love to, but we only work for the Omnissiah, so fuck off." Then the Emperor said, "Alright, bet. Show me your most broken mech." And they did, and he healed the bitch. Or maybe he didn't and just did some illusion magic to make it look like he did. And they went, holy binary for a minute. And then, I mean, holy shit, it's the Omnissiah. Okay, we'll build you shit. Also, by the way, the Emperor is like a crazy powerful psyker. What's a psyker? Think a wizard who uses the powers of the warp. Like D&D sorcerers a little bit, but everyone is wild magic. You roll wrong, and a demon pops out of your very real head and starts killing everyone while you lie bleeding out from your exploded head. It's really dangerous. Now, the Mechanicus is, quote, part of the Imperium of Man, unquote. It's kind of like Greenland and Denmark, you know. They run themselves, but for all intents and purposes, on paper, they're part of the Imperium, you know. So the Mechanicus goes to work building shit for the Imperium. Except, after the Age of Technology, AI went berserk, full Skynet mode, and humanity had to go to war with their own machines to put them down. So AI, abominable intelligence, is banned. Also, innovation/invention is banned, so the Mechanicus is all about the past. Finding old tech, archaeotech, you may have heard, and using it. But basically everyone who understands how it actually works or is functioning is dead, so they do crazy rituals like lighting incense and reciting a prayer to get your computer to work, or putting a candle on your AC unit to appease the machine spirit that lives inside it. Dumb fuckers, but that's what you get when acquiring knowledge is banned and your job is computers. They literally and metaphorically worship the technology of the past, and if they find a piece of archaeotech, it is like the second coming in that it hurts a little bit and there's less of it than you think. See, during the golden age of technology, humanity started making standard template constructs, or STCs. Imagine IKEA instructions for literally anything. From a combat knife up to an entire factory settlement. You drop an STC on a planet with untrained civilians and they can figure it out. Crazy stuff. So the Mechanicus is creaming themselves, racing to scour the galaxy and find these STCs because it's basically the only new to them / different technology that they're allowed to use. They value it so highly that when a few random foot soldiers of the Imperium basically fell in a hole and found one for a combat knife that was a little lighter and sharper than the existing one, they were given a planet as a reward. Each. So the Mechanicus is the perfect blend of cathedrals, pipe organs, chanting choirs, and steel bodies robed in red, digging in ruins to find ancient relics that they will use to build their god machines. You want grimdark? I got you grimdark. Let's talk about organization. As with everything in or around the Imperium, it's super hierarchical. At the very bottom, you have the servo skulls and the servitors. What are those? Well, my friend, if you have AI banned and you need to automate a system, how do you do it? Well, it's quite simple. You take a prisoner on death row, likely there because he looked funny at a superior, you lobotomize him, you rip his arms off, and you give him forklift arms. Then you put him to work carrying boxes for you. Alternatively, you rip his head off so it's just a brain and a skull, you plug hella RAM and CPUs into it, and you make it hang out around your shoulder like the world's ugliest parrot, and use it as an external hard drive to store your memories and treat it like a secretary. Barely above the servitors are the Scitari. These are the foot soldiers and general units of the Adeptus Mechanicus, or AdMech if you're nasty. Think 80% robots with 20% human bits powering it, like the brain and lungs, and that's it. They get radiation rifles and have some free will, but either are heavily incentivized to follow orders or are bound to their leaders. Above the Scitari are the tech priests. These are the commissioned officers of the AdMech. They're the ones who actually have a lick of a clue what's going on and probably still have all their free will. They got mostly robotized because they wanted it, not because someone needed a new servant. Importantly, if you're getting a new arm in the AdMech as a tech priest, they don't cut it off. Nah, son, it's grimdark. You gotta understand the weakness of your flesh and appreciate the steel, so they use a grinder. Starting from your hand and grind your whole arm to dust while you're awake before they put on your new dope steel Bucky arm. The tech priests are spread around the Imperium. Pretty much every ship will have one, making sure all the weapons and ships and tech generally is behaving itself. Think space IT, but you don't know shit about computers and all you have is a set of incense. Oh, and a prayer book. Now, above the tech priests are the Magos. These are the actual leaders of the AdMech. Magos are in charge of whole platoons of tech priests and armies of Scitari. They're crazy fuckers, using straight up faith to play with the biggest toys imaginable. They'll get shit done and make you say thank you. Also, they will make such a big gun go boom that there's a hole in that planet there for you to fuck yourself with. We love a Magos. And above the Magos is the Archmagos. They're exactly as the name implies. Magos, but more and bigger. They're likely to be deeper in bureaucracy than a regular Magos, though. And the head Magos is the Fabricator General. He sits on the Council of the High Lords of Terra. Read, the council that runs the Imperium. Now let's talk about the hobby. 40k is referred to as the hobby by folks into it because it takes so much to be into. There's generally 3 aspects that each fan will fall into, primarily, secondarily, and tertiarily. These are lore, modeling/painting, and the tabletop. Now, for example, I am a lorehead, followed by a tabletop player, followed by a modeler. I love stories, I like strategy games, and I have shaky hands. So we've been talking lore this whole time. you can hopefully start to understand how much this can suck someone in. The setting is so broad and so forgiving on canon that it's generally agreed upon that any story you want to tell can fit within the setting. The tabletop is wildly intensive. It will take an afternoon to play one game, typically. A game is measured in hours, and with a standard 2,000 points are assigned to models to demonstrate strength, it's a balancing mechanism, game, expect 3 to 5 hours of gameplay with experienced players. To have a functional, read tournament legal army, it must be properly modeled and painted, and that can take 20 to 50 hours to model and paint fully depending on the army you choose and the size of game you're planning to play. And this is in your free time of life, so measure this time realistically in months. And that's without going into the lore for your army at all if it's homebrew. And all that is just to figure out if you like the army on tabletop and if it plays well. People get super into this because it eats money and time like nothing else. Magic the Gathering eats wallets, but 40k eats pensions. Alright, we're back on the Imperium. Let's talk about the Primarchs. So, the Emperor of Mankind is the most powerful dude ever. The best psyker, the best genetic engineer, the best leader, the strongest, the tallest, the most luxurious hair, everything. He was literally made in a vat because a bunch of wizards foresaw the future and all sacrificed themselves to empower this one baby. The Emperor is immortal, mostly, and has been around since humanity has been around. There's canonical hints that he was Alexander the Great, Jesus, Buddha, etc. If there was a great man, it might have been the Emperor. Generally, he laid low throughout history, waiting for his time to take the reins, and his chance came after the Age of Strife. Remember, the Eldar were fucking up and making Slaanesh, so the entire galaxy was basically untraversable. Earth had gone full Mad Max and needed unifying, so the Emperor did so. He and his Thunder Warriors, think Conan and the Barbarians, beat Earth, henceforth Terra, into submission. Then the Emperor did not need his Thunder Warriors anymore, so he had them removed from the chessboard by his Custodes, or the Custodian Guard. Now, the Custodes are the closest thing to the Emperor in power. They're the ones you see in golden armor with the conical helm and usually a big glowing blue spear thing. More on them later. Suffice to say, the Emperor's record of only big strong men will be within 5 miles of me continues. After the Emperor unified Terra, it was time to unify humanity scattered across the stars. To do so, he would need warriors, a scalpel to the Thunder Warrior's sledgehammer. And thus, the Emperor began work on his Space Marines. He would create 18 sons to lead his 18 legions. There were originally 20, but 2 have been struck from the record. See the little guy thesis. The Emperor made a deal with the Chaos Gods for some extra power to make his sons. He created them, and they were perfect. Little babies, but in short order would grow into princes of massive stature and power. And he began to utilize their genetic material to create gene seed. Gene seed is the genetic material that is used as the basis for Space Marines. It's think like a little organ implanted into aspiring Space Marines that physically changes them, gaining physical characteristics like their Primarch and often some of their personality. A Space Marine truly becomes like a son of their Primarch. But the Emperor went back on his deal with the gods, so the gods decided to fuck with him back. They yoinked the baby Primarchs and tossed them across the stars. Think, honestly, like the beginning of Megamind, and with similar results. The Emperor, pissed that there were consequences to his actions, began the Great Crusade, to unify the stars and to find his sons. Now we're going to go through them 1 through 20 as they're assigned to the legions. Bear in mind that this is not the order in which they were found. First, we have Lion L. Johnson, the Lion, the first, Primarch of the Dark Angels. He's tall, handsome, secretive, and paranoid. He's got long blonde hair and a beard, and he's heavily inspired by Arthurian legend. Loyalty is its own reward, is a quote of his. The Lion landed on Caliban, a world near the Eye of Terror, which is a massive warp portal and a result of the birth of Slaanesh. Caliban is cursed, a death world, full of monsters, and humanity lived in a feudal system with orders of knights to fight against the great beasts that prowled in the darkness. The Lion landed in the jungles and survived for a decade alone. He grew quickly, and at the end of the decade he was happened upon by a band of knights from the Order, and they convinced the savage man to join them. Despite his youth, he was already larger than the average man, and Luther, the leader of the band, adopted him into the Order and his personal care. He rose through the ranks quickly, finally leading the Order after a time. The Emperor arrived, and the Lion felt a psychic connection to the Emperor immediately. He swore fealty to the Emperor upon his landing and took control of the First Legion Astartes. Astartes is Space Marines. You'll hear a lot of High Gothic, or it's like Semi-Latin, and Low Gothic, which is just English. It'll come up a lot. The Lion is known for his paranoia, grand strategy skill, and being an unbeatable duelist. Number 2, the Second Legion is struck from history, with no record and no legion remaining. Insert your homebrew legion here. Next we have Fulgrim, the Phoenician, the Illuminator, the Prefector of Chemos, the Perfect. Fulgrim is suave, beautiful, and diplomatic. He is gorgeous, physically perfect, with white flowing hair. Perfection is not a state of being, it is a state of striving. The journey is all that has meaning, not the goal. Fulgrim landed on Chemos, a mining world impoverished. From the place he landed, a stream of pure water flowed. Fulgrim began his life as a humble factory worker, but soon grew into a legend. At half the age of his fellow workers, he ran his factory. He was able to understand and upgrade the technology, increasing efficiency dramatically. Under Fulgrim's leadership, the machine world began to see success and surplus. This allowed them to expand into art and culture, aspects of humanity long sacrificed for survival. 50 years after Fulgrim's landing, Chemos was united under his leadership. The Crusade arrived, and Fulgrim as well felt connections to these men from the stars. He knelt, offering his sword to his father. On the voyage to Terra, Fulgrim learned the grim news that his legion's gene seed had been destroyed, and was irreplaceable without him. Thus, instead of a true legion like his brothers, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, he had a mere 200 under his command. Fulgrim stood to address his sons, and his speech inspired even the Emperor to such a degree that the Emperor gave to him and his legion the sole right to bear the sign of the Aquila, the Imperium's symbol, a two-headed eagle. And thus was his legion named, the Emperor's Children. Fulgrim is known for his diplomacy, his tact, his love of beauty and culture, seeking perfection. He is an equal duelist to the Lion, though where the Lion fights to win, to Fulgrim the duel is an art. Next is Perturabo of the Fourth Legion, the Hammer of Olympia, the Lord of Iron, a man as brutal and simple as his titles imply, or so you would think. A man of impeccable architecture, civil design, machinery, and leadership, autism incarnate, technology and logic. You don't know the things I dream. No one does. No one ever cared enough to find out. And this is where the tragic and grimdark begins. Perturabo landed on the planet of Olympia, where he spent a year wandering the mountains, slaying beasts. He was found by scouts and taken to the nearby city of Lokos. The tyrant of Lokos found him fascinating, adopting him and educating him. This relationship was less of a father-son and more tyrant-prized possession. He paraded Perturabo before the other cities, showing off his son and his abilities in debate, reason, combat, and design. Perturabo hated this treatment, and the heavily religious society he found himself in, believing in the cold logic of reason and science. Foregoing the mystical names of his family, he chose an ancient Olympian name that means "he who does great deeds." Perturabo grew into a grand general, his father forcing him to lead armies in sieges against neighboring nations. War after war Perturabo was pushed into, and his genius bent towards crushing those who stood against the tyrant of Lokos. Perturabo wanted nothing of war. He desired to build civil projects, creating better lives for his people, not to crush and burn with his skill. But the tyrant would not allow him, seeing him only as a tool for war. Perturabo found his only solace in the company of his foster sister, Caliphany. When the emperor arrived, Perturabo immediately bowed to his rule and turned on the tyrant, ousting him. Perturabo was given the lead of the 4th Legion, the Iron Warriors. He examined their records and found them wanting. His first order to his new sons was decimation. 1 in 10 soldiers were to be beaten to death by the other 9. His rule of his sons was as brutal and utilitarian as his father's rule was to him. Perturabo was recognized by the emperor as having the greatest technological and scientific mind of his sons. His ruthlessness was legendary. His legion specialized in siege warfare and brutal tactics, using thought to be impossible war machines to destroy fortifications and bring enemies to heel. Next is Jaghatai Khan, the Great Khan, the Warhawk. A quiet man, a man who knows that he need not speak his accomplishments, as they speak for themselves. We remained true. They can never have this, not if they burn all we ever built and scorn us through the dancing flames. You hear me? We remained true. The Khan landed on Chagoris, a wide open world full of plains and steppes. It's heavily Mongolian-inspired. He grew through the ranks rapidly. Notice the theme? Taking command of his clan, becoming Khan, and through his intense knowledge as well as martial skill, united his world. His pragmatism and unwillingness to engage in frivolity led him to great respect and even greater accomplishments. The Khan's pragmatism led to his war style. He specialized in lightning-fast and razor-sharp tactics, moving with blinding speed to those who were accustomed to speeches of honor and general blowharding. The Khan joined the emperor without hesitation, seeing that they had the same goal: unite the stars under one banner. Their reunion was less "my son, my father," and more respectful business partnership. The emperor saw what the Khan achieved and brought him in as an honored general, rather than a son to be disciplined and shepherded. Due to his quiet nature, he gained a reputation of being a brute among his brothers, but this was untrue. His cultural knowledge and artistic appreciation was high. He simply kept to himself. The Khan was given control of the White Scars Legion to continue his style of extremely fast and extremely brutal combat. Next up, we have Leman Russ, the Great Wolf, the Lord of Winter and War, the Executioner. A brutal and savage man with a wild and fierce personality. He became the Emperor's executioner and was among the most powerful warriors of the Primarchs. Beat your thoughts to the mold of your will. Leman Russ fell on the planet of Fenris, an ice world, remote and desolate. He was adopted by a massive she-wolf and raised among the pack. He was captured by the humans on the planet and brought to the king. He was assimilated, learning their tactics and aptitude. He He mastered their weapons, roaring with laughter and singing tunelessly with ale in hand. He came to learn that he was more human than wolf, though superior to both. His strength unmatched, his ferocity to be feared, when the king died, he was made king immediately. When the emperor arrived, he did not do so in full royal regalia, but cloaked and disguised. Russ did not acknowledge him as the master of mankind, and challenged this new-coming giant to a series of tests: eating competition, which Russ won, drinking contest, which Russ won, and finally, a test of combat, a brawl which lasted for hours, the emperor and Russ fighting brutally. The emperor finally took victory, felling the stuffed and drunken Russ with a crushing blow from his power glove. Russ admitted defeat and swore fealty to the emperor. Russ was the second Primarch to be found, after Horus. Horus sneered at Russ for his savage ways, but Russ responded by requesting friendship and offering a friendly brawl. Russ was given control of the Space Wolves. He is known as a cunning and fierce leader, if slightly unstable. He holds himself as the Emperor's most loyal son, a brawler, far preferring to be in the thick of it with his lightning claws than behind giving orders. Next is Rogal Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra, the soldier. Dorn is as simple and effective as the fortifications he builds. A man of few words and immovable will. Diametrically opposed to Perturabo and his Iron Warriors, Dorn and his Imperial Fists are the unbreakable fortress to their unstoppable siege. There is no enemy. The foe on the battlefield is merely the manifestation of that which we must overcome. He is doubt and fear and despair. Every battle is fought within. Conquer the battlefield that lies inside you, and the enemy disappears like the illusion he is. Very little is known about Rogal Dorn's youth. He doesn't speak of it much. He landed on Inwit, an ice planet. We do know that the man who adopted him, Dorn called grandfather, and when he died, Dorn kept a fur-lined robe that belonged to him and slept with it on his bed every night. Dorn, like his brothers, grew into leadership rapidly, leading and overseeing his planet before he was fully grown. He was fascinated by a massive space station in orbit around Inwit, called the Phalanx, and spent many decades investigating and reactivating it. The Emperor arrived, this is the 7th Primarch to be found, and met Dorn aboard the bridge of the Phalanx. The Emperor welcomed Dorn, appreciated his work with the Phalanx, and allowed Dorn to keep it as the mobile fortress monastery of his legion. He was given control of the Imperial Fists Legion. Dorn is immovable, straightforward, accepting no failures or frivolity, stern and unsmiling. Next is Konrad Curze, the Night Haunter, the Killer, a brutal and unstable man. He lives terror and darkness, plagued by nightmares and prophetic visions of his own death. Think Rorschach from Watchmen, or Batman if Batman really, really liked flaying things. Death is nothing compared to vindication. Curze landed on the planet of Nostromo. Nostromo is a night world, heavy in mining and industry. This world is immensely grim, dark, cyberpunk evil. It is always night, it is usually raining, and crime runs rampant in the streets as the wealthy live in their towers. Curze was not taken in by any family, instead raising himself on the streets. He was plagued by constant visions, prophetic of both himself and others, and always of horror and death. He was surrounded by vile, evil people, criminals who tortured for fun, raping and killing the impoverished workers on the planet. Curze hated this and began hunting these criminals. He became the Night Haunter. Their bodies would appear, flayed, hanging from gibbets and lampposts, gutted or castrated. Some were just beaten to the point that they were unrecognizable. Within the year, crime dropped to near zero. Society changed drastically as the Night Haunter instituted an unofficial curfew, killing anyone he found outside. Curze appeared before the nobles, becoming the first monarch of Nostromo. He learned quickly, being known as a surprisingly fair ruler, until word of injustice or harm came to him, whereupon he would hunt the guilty through the streets with his dirty talons, flaying and gutting them upon finding them. The Emperor's arrival had been foretold as a prophecy, and would lead to the downfall of the planet. The Emperor and several Primarchs landed to gather Konrad, and upon seeing them, Curze was overcome with the strongest vision yet. So horrifying, he attempted to claw his own eyes out, but was stopped by the Emperor. "Konrad Curze, be at peace, for I have arrived and intend to take you home." And this is what he said. "That is not my name, father. I am Night Haunter, and I know full well what you intend for me." Curze was given leadership of the 8th Legion, the Night Lords. They are different from their brothers, as they are not soldiers or glory-driven. They are, to a man, criminals, violent and bloodthirsty, much akin to the Clockwork Orange cops. They rule through fear, violence, and see humanity as things to be killed for fun. And, in direct opposition to Mr. Edgewood Darkbottom above, we have Sanguinius, the great angel. If there was ever a people's hero Primarch, it was Sanguinius. He was beloved, heroic, charismatic, humble, and noble. The great angel had wings to match his soul. Everyone loved him and respected him as a fighter and a leader, and his brothers respected him greatly amongst themselves. If you truly do hail from the realm that men once called Hell, when you return there, tell your kindred it was Sanguinius who threw you back. Sanguinius landed on the radiation-soaked moon of Baal Secundus, adopted by the people of the Blood. At a year old, he was a full-grown man, and grew in feats and strength daily. He slew great predators, monsters that killed humans on this deathly world. Unique among the Primarchs, he had a pair of white angel wings on his back, unknown if by design of the Emperor or a mutation from the high radiation on Baal. He had latent psychic abilities, able to see the future. Sanguinius led the Blood in wars against the mutants of Baal. He was beloved and known for his kind nature, but in battle he was a being of unstoppable wrath and judgment against those who threatened his people. They vanquished the mutants, and Sanguinius became worshipped as a god. The Emperor arrived, disguising himself, to witness Sanguinius give a speech to his followers, an impassioned speech displaying both humility and courage. Like Curze, Sanguinius had already foreseen the arrival of the Emperor in his psychic dreams and recognized him immediately. Sanguinius asked the Emperor, if he joined, to guarantee the safety of his people on Baal. He also asked what would happen if he refused to join, notably the only Primarch to do so. The Emperor guaranteed the safety of his people and told Sanguinius that he knew that he would join, as Sanguinius seeks to save the people of the galaxy, just like he sought to save the people of Baal. This satisfied Sanguinius, who swore fealty. There was one aspect of our beloved angel that was not perfect, however. The red thirst was latent, itching at him, the thirst for blood. His sons felt the same, and it was their greatest shame. Their vampirism was their secret, never to be spoken of. And Sanguinius was given charge of the Blood Angels Legion. Next we have Ferrus Manus, the Gorgon, the Great Iron Father. Ferrus Manus is the most reserved of the Primarchs. Silent, effective, if a buzz cut was a person. He lost both hands and had them replaced with necrodermis. Long story. Suffice to say, metal hands, allowing him the ability to shape molten metal without tools. If fighting is all there is, if we may never pause to reflect on what such devotion to strength is doing to us, then our compulsion will only grow. Already I see the madness that path leads to, and so I shall excise the silver from my hands. In doing so, I shall weaken myself and my sons, but nonetheless it must be done. The hands are strong and have created many things, but they are not mine. Ferrus landed on Medusa, and upon escaping his pod, inspected it, seeing it to be no natural occurrence. His investigations awoke a massive biomechanical worm that attacked him. He fought it off, and it fled. He followed, swearing to destroy the beast he unleashed. He did so, only revealing himself to the local populace after it was destroyed. In the destruction of the worm, itself indestructible to normal assaults, he drowned it in magma. Its melting flesh fused with his hands, turning them from flesh into the metal we know him to have. Ferrus returned to the tribes, taking control and lecturing them on technology, advancing them greatly, and Medusa prospered. Ferrus never united the world, like his brothers, because he saw the competition between tribes as healthy and good. When the Emperor arrived, Ferrus challenged him to a battle and fought to a standstill. Grateful to have finally met his match, Ferrus joined the Emperor, taking control of the 10th Legion, the Iron Hands. Ferrus, legendarily silent and standoffish, had one friend among his brothers, Fulgrim. He initially dismissed Fulgrim as flighty and weak due to his interest in diplomacy and art, but came to respect and enjoy his presence over time. Fulgrim was the only one who could make Ferrus smile, joking with him and referring to him as the Gorgon, the mythical Terran beast that turned men to stone with its ugliness. 11. Another deleted legion. There is no lore here. 12. Angron, the Lord of the Red Sands, the Red Angel. This will be a difficult one, as we have to talk about what Angron was like before and what Angron is now. Angron is possibly the most tragic of the Primarchs. Angron was kind, empathetic, and caring, the most emotional of the Primarchs, and made to be the emotional glue of his brothers, the one to hold them together. He's loyal to a fault and leads through compassion. Angron is, however, now the definition of rage incarnate, through no choice of his own. Angron landed on Nuceria, where many of his brothers landed in the laps of luxury or were taken in to be cared for by a family. Angron was captured by slavers. He was sold to the local nobility to be used as a gladiator in their blood arenas. He grew fast, and he grew strong, as a child dominating the hot dust against men thrice his age, crushing them. He fought with honor, never killing his opponents if they fought well. He was beloved by his fellow slaves, and the nobles loved him for his entertainment. His only father figure was an old slave, a gladiator named Oenomaus. They were unstoppable on the hot dust, Angron through his brutal strength and tactical mind, and Oenomaus through wise skill and perfectly placed strikes. Angron had become an unofficial leader of the gladiator slaves, preparing them for rebellion against the nobles that enslaved them and forced them to kill each other for entertainment. This was galvanized when, on one fateful day, Angron and Oenomaus were forced to fight. Angron refused to fight his father, despite Oenomaus accepting and reassuring Angron that he was ready to die. This day would change everything, because the nobles, angered by Angron's refusal, would forcibly implant ancient technology into Angron's head, known as the Butcher's Nails. The Butcher's Nails were insidious implants that affected the emotional cores of the brain, leading to unimaginable pain, migraines, and blurred vision if the host felt any emotion besides bloodlust and rage. The only thing that could quell the pain was killing, and they were very popular among the nobles due to the horrific sights that would take place on the hot dust from their hosts. Removal of the nails was impossible, as it always killed the host. With the nails implanted, Angron crushed Oenomaus, killing him brutally. Angron, grieving the death of his father and hating himself for his own bloody hands, called his fellow slaves to rebellion, crushing their city and the nobles within hours. They fought with sticks and rocks, and they took their vengeance. They stood no chance against the whole planet, and were cornered in the mountains by an army, ready to fight to the end rather than go back to being slaves. This is when the Emperor appeared. The armies faced off, 100 slaves with stone weapons against thousands of guards with rifles. The Emperor teleported Angron onto his ship, and refused to let Angron fight, nor to intervene on his son's behalf, leaving his fellow slaves to be massacred, wondering how their leader could have fled and abandoned them to die at the hands of their oppressors. Angron was furious, and was forced into leadership of the World Eaters' Legion. He would hate his father for what he did, only leading through pain and forced submission by the Emperor. Angron to this day is rage, hatred, and violence incarnate. His good nature was corrupted and torn away by the nails, and he is forced to be the lowest version of himself at all times by a new tyrant. He and his legion are mad dogs, used as line breakers and shock troops. Nothing more. Next is Roboute Guilliman, the Master of Ultramar, the Uniter. He's a statecrafter, a diplomat, and a leader through and through. A man who understands that after war, peace must come, and in peace there must be stability. They shall be pure of heart and strong of body, untainted by doubt and unsullied by self-aggrandizement. They will be bright stars on the firmament of battle, angels of death whose shining wings bring swift annihilation to the enemies of man. Roboute landed on Macragge, and was adopted by the local governors. He was raised in council rooms and throne rooms, a master of logistics and strategy, seeing charts and spreadsheets as equally important to battlefields and troop movements. He was intelligent, wise, though lacking in some charisma, being blunt and straightforward. He became a leader nigh instantly, leading campaigns of unification across the world, utilizing his enemies' weaknesses against them effortlessly. The world came into compliance quickly, with only some rebellions. He created a meritocracy, giving titles and responsibility to only those who were effective, not merely based on title or blood. This led to a prospering empire. The Emperor arrived and found Macragge flourishing under his son's leadership, and the Emperor was proud. He gave Roboute command of the 13th Legion, the Ultramarines. They are known for their careful wars, taking the enemies quickly but not leaving carnage in their wake. They leave infrastructure and logistics behind them, adding into the empire rather than only rubble. Next is Mortarion, the Pale King, the Reaper of Men, the Child of Death. His best-known trait is his relentlessness, never giving up, no matter how slowly he always moves forward. Secondly, he hated the warp and all psychers. That being said, he is a follower, rarely under his own will, and thus struggles when not under orders. He was closest with Horus, the War Master. I am not like you. I do not wallow in this corruption. I use it. I control it. I set bounds on it. Mortarion landed on Barbarous, a planet overtaken by poisonous fog. Humans lived below, in the relatively unpoisoned depths, while warlords and mutants roamed above. Mortarion was taken in by the greatest of the warlords, and trained as his champion. He was able to breathe the fog, with difficulty. Over time, he began to learn more of what the planet was, and escaped his warlord adoption, joining the humans below and coming to lead them. He fashioned breathing apparatuses for them, and began a crusade into the fog to crush the warlords who had broken the world. When he was facing his cruel adoptive father, Mortarion had been beaten and on his knee awaiting death. The Emperor arrived, defeating the warlord with a single swing of his sword. Mortarion swore fealty and joined the crusade, taking control of the Death Guard Legion, so named for his rebel group on Barbarous. They specialized in slow, attritive warfare, using chemical weapons, poisoning their foes, and advancing like a slow, inexorable tide. 15. Magnus the Red, the Crimson King, Red Cyclops. Magnus was a giant, with crimson skin and hair. He was an immensely powerful psyker, a sorcerer of unimaginable power, second only to his father. He was intelligent, curious, and always seeking new knowledge. If I am guilty of anything, it is the simple pursuit of knowledge. Magnus landed on Prospero, which, through a wild stroke of fate, happened to be a leper colony for psychers. He, due to his aforementioned massive brain, remembers his infancy and childhood perfectly. He also communicated with the Emperor regularly through their shared psychic power before meeting in person. Magnus learned all he could from the psyker colony, growing and leading them in scholarly pursuits, eventually ruling the planet. When the Emperor arrived, they embraced and spoke as old friends, having been in communication for years. Magnus immediately took over the Thousand Sons Legion, training them in the use of the warp and their psychic abilities. His fellow Primarchs and their legions were understandably wary of him and his legion, but that never slowed him for a second. A legion full of psychers, and only stabilized by Magnus through a deal he made with a warp entity, which turns out it was Tzeentch pulling his LMAO Gotham strategy, that cost him his eye to save his sons from mutation. Next is Horus Lupercal, the War Master. There is much to say, and yet not much to be said about Horus, the first son to be found, having landed on a planet very near to the Sol system. Horus was very close with the Emperor, and his right-hand man through the entirety of the Crusade, eventually being named War Master and given command of his brothers, answering only to their father. Horus was a brilliant general, a decent warrior, but most importantly, he was a leader. Charismatic and extremely perceptive, he would learn people quickly, then applying pressure and rewards to move them to his will. Despite his relatively moderate skill in all other areas, it was this skill that led to his placement as War Master. Horus landed on Chthoniya, galactically Terra's next-door neighbor. Horus was taken in by a gang and engaged in constant gang warfare on the streets. He happened upon a squad of tech priests dismantling the pod he arrived in, and fought them. This angered his gang leader, saying that whoever he killed would have more men to come looking for them. The leader was correct, as the tech priests came back in force, looking to kill Horus. Horus survived, though his gang was slaughtered. He gained memories, remembering Terra and knowledge of the galaxy. He sought the Emperor immediately, and accounts disagree on whether the Emperor went to Chthoniya or if Horus went to Terra. Regardless, he swore fealty immediately, and took control of the Luna Wolves, redubbed to the Sons of Horus Legion. This legion specialized in assault warfare, being an unstoppable spear, thrown with accuracy and power, straight into the weakest point of their enemies. 17th is Lorgar Aurelian, the priest of mankind, the Urizen, word-bearer. Lorgar is fiercely religious, zealous to a fault, prone to fanaticism. Lorgar loved the Emperor and worshipped him as a god, despite the Emperor's constant denial and insistence on atheism. All I ever wanted was the truth. Lorgar landed on Colchis, a desert feudal planet rife with religions, crusades, and holy wars. He was adopted by Cor Ferron, an exiled priest who sensed the boy was special, believing him blessed and holy. Lorgar became his disciple, believing wholeheartedly in the religion that adopted him, despite the abuses rained on him by his new father. He researched and learned and adopted every principle perfectly. Despite all the horrors from his adopted father, Lorgar loved him and even saved his life once. He became a preacher, a manipulator, and a charismatic leader through his zealotry and intellect. However, as time went on, he was plagued by visions of a giant in golden armor, with a cyclopean man beside in blue robes. He began to preach the arrival of their god, disrupting the Covenant's rule. They saw this as a chance to get rid of the threat he was becoming, declaring him a heretic and attempting to have him killed. A war began, his followers fighting with the status quo of the Covenant. Lorgar won, and began to prepare his planet for the arrival of their god and savior of humanity, the Emperor. The Emperor arrived with Magnus beside him, who Lorgar recognized as the figures from his visions, and he restructured the faith to be full worship of the Emperor, celebrating their arrival. The Emperor gave Lorgar lead of the Legion of the Word-Bearers, who were the zealots and fanatics of the Emperor. He disapproved of worship of himself and constantly reprimanded Lorgar and his legion for their worship. Nevertheless, they tattooed his words on their bodies and worshipped him constantly. 18th is Vulkan, the Lord of Drakes, the Unbound Flame. Vulkan is a giant, even among the Primarchs, a massive wall of a man with obsidian skin and crimson eyes. Despite his ferocious appearance and imposing presence, Vulkan is the kindest of the Primarchs, always willing to listen. Vulkan is a forge master, building weapons of great beauty and power, and sees no reason to save humanity if humanity is not alive to see it. Collateral is not a word in his personal dictionary. The flesh is weak, but deeds endure. Vulkan, like all Primarchs, inherited something from his father. However, unlike his brothers who inherited appearance or personality, he inherited his father's perpetual nature. Being a perpetual means that Vulkan is functionally immortal, being able to regenerate from any injury and will never die of age. He landed on Nocturne, being taken in by a local blacksmith. In no time at all, he was huge, intelligent, and their best smith. Nocturne was regularly raided by the Drukhari for slaves and sacrifices to Slaanesh. It was so regular that each person had their own hiding place, as there was no fighting the technologically advanced Drukhari for them. Upon their raid, Vulkan refused to stand down, standing in the center of the settlement with 2 smithing hammers as the raiders approached. The people rose to fight with him, and they defeated the Drukhari raiders. All settlements came to see the man who had faced down their oppressors, and a celebration was declared in his honor, a tournament. A newcomer joined the tournament, unassuming and small, but he challenged Vulkan to every event. At the end of 8 days, Vulkan and the stranger were tied, and they agreed that whoever lost would serve the other forever. The final test was a 24-hour period to construct a weapon and slay the largest salamander, read dragon, they could find. Vulkan brought a massive fire drake, but as he descended the volcano, it erupted, pushing him off a cliff, leaving him hanging from one hand while holding his drake with the other. Unable to pull both himself and the drake up, he had to choose pride or his life. It was at this time that the stranger passed by, carrying an undoubtedly larger drake. However, seeing Vulkan struggling, the stranger threw his drake into a lava flow, using it as a bridge to come save Vulkan, pulling him and his drake up over the cliff. In the time it took, however, the stranger's drake burned up. Upon returning to town, despite having carried back his drake, Vulkan dropped to a knee, saying that anyone who valued life above pride and victory was worthy of his service. This was when the stranger revealed himself to be the Emperor of Mankind. Vulkan was given leadership over the Salamanders, the Legion who cares. They fight primarily with flame weapons, in close quarters, burning and crushing like their Primarch, but they will not hesitate to give their lives for a single civilian. 19th is Corvus Corax, the Raven Lord, the Liberator. Corvus is a quiet loomer and a believer in hit-and-run tactics. Stealthy and often invisible, he prefers to not be perceived. Effective and quiet, he speaks little of his accomplishments, simply knowing that they were achieved is enough. He would only speak for the underdog, lifting up those voices which were unheard. Let me tell you of my lord. Corax is the enemy of the oppressor. He is a friend of the people. He was raised among them, taught by them. Corvus landed on Lycaeus, a desolate moon. However, it was a powerful forge world, technologically advanced but staffed nearly entirely by beaten slaves. Corvus was found by the slaves, and the pale-skinned boy was raised to be a worker. He led the slaves, growing in understanding and knowledge, becoming the savior they hoped he would be. He organized the workers into rebels, guerrilla fighters fighting against the oppressors. Riots and strikes, attacks and hiding, he wore down the garrison's strength. Then, when the rulers brought the hammer down, he was ready. They outmaneuvered the rulers and sabotaged the forge world, crushing the fighters as well as rendering the source of the rulers' wealth inert. This led to the rulers falling to internal civil wars and conflicts, leaving the slaves free. The emperor arrived on the day of deliverance, their victory day, and spent a day and night with his son privately. Legend says that he told Corvus of the existence of the warp and warned him of the ruinous powers, before naming him the Primarch of the Raven Guard. The Raven Guard are guerrilla fighters, snipers, sabotage experts, specializing in never being seen and bringing their opponents down with a single, precisely timed and placed bullet. 20. Alpharius and Omegon, the twin Primarchs, the last Primarch, Lord of Serpents. The only Primarchs to separate into twins, they are identical in every way. They describe themselves as one soul in two bodies. They are the most enigmatic in the Imperium, and reports are extremely unreliable. Alpharius and Omegon are the masters of subterfuge, confusion, infiltration, and espionage. Thus, the record of them looks like the CIA spilled their ink all over the records. We know basically nothing about them except this. All legionnaires look exactly the same. They all claim to be Alpharius. They are all lying. They engage in all manner of infiltration, up to and including facial reconstruction surgery, eliminating a target, taking their place, and then removing those close to them. You will never know they're here, and you will never know they're gone. Now that we've covered the basics of the Imperium and the Primarchs, we can start to discuss arguably the most important event in human history in the setting, the Horus Heresy. It is certainly the most recent major change, and it is the basis for most of the current events in the year 40,000. This is the first story that I will tell you set in the setting. So, the Emperor of Mankind starts his great crusade to bring humanity into compliance. He is also seeking his lost sons, the Primarchs, who've been shot crazy style across the stars. And he needs his boys back so he can abuse them properly. Or, well, abuse Angron. The rest he was just generally, on average, kinda not great to. Now, the human race is spread to the very edges of the galaxy. In 40K, the Imperium is estimated to be present and active on over 1 million worlds. 1,000,000 planets, all with people and all making shit work for humanity. Not including all the planets nearby with little stations or whatever. So, let's do some background again. Remember how I said that FTL travel is through the warp? Let's talk a little more about it. So, traveling through a portal into literal, actual hell, then moving through it to exit another portal back into real space because physical distances don't line up properly, allowing you to move great distances in real space while moving regular distances in the warp, is pretty crazy, but that's the basis for how it works for the Imperium and for most Xenos. But the warp doesn't line up normally in the flow of time as well as space, so you can enter space at Terra, exit it at Macragge, and having only flown as far as Terra to Mars, for example, but you can also exit 90 years in the past. That being said, timelines are fucky-wucky, and going back to the little guy thesis means you can have any generation model fight any other. Warp fuckery shrug emoji is a reason for a great many things. But Torch, how does one travel in the warp without being eaten by all those demons you keep talking about, or without getting lost? Ah, my friend, wow, you are so intelligent and wise. That is such a good and insightful question. Cookie for you. There's two important pieces to each ship that helps with those things. They are notoriously unreliable, so it does happen often that ships go into the warp, and Khorne uses it as his very own personal fleshlight. These two main things on each ship are 1, a navigator, and 2, a Geller field. 1. A navigator is a special psyker and a mutant. Lots of psykers look normal and can pass as normal people. Not navigators. They have a gene that gives them a literal third eye, middle of the forehead. And this eye is chock full of warp energy, and if they open their eye, that warp energy floods out and usually ends up killing a lot of things. This eye allows them to see into the warp, and if they're currently in the warp, to see the Astronomicon. What's the Astronomicon? It's basically a massive lighthouse that the Emperor built where Terra is in the warp. So if you can see the Astronomicon, you can navigate through the warp. Knowing where Terra is means you can know where you are. If the Astronomicon were to ever go out, all travel in the warp would become like playing darts in a dark room and hitting a pancake somebody taped to the ceiling. 2. A Geller field. This is a kind of shield that protects from the warp. It's not an energy shield like you may be picturing. A Geller field is actually often created by a specific psyker who is asleep and dreaming of real space, which projects a bubble of real space around the ship, and then that bubble kind of surfs atop the surface of the Sea of Souls, catching the currents and protecting it from those storms and entities. Those are exactly as loose protection as you think. Navigators screw up, and Geller field generators wake up, and that is when shit goes south directly and expeditiously. So, why am I talking about the warp and the generalized fuckery therein? Because timelines are fucked in this setting. Canonically, there's an entire wing of the bureaucracy in the Imperium dedicated to finding out what year it is. They don't know, so how the hell are we supposed to know? As we get closer to exact details, things will only get fuzzier. If things don't seem like they line up, they probably don't. It's explained away by warp fuckery, and if that doesn't work, clashing authors. Just roll with it. All that being said, so, the Great Crusade kicks off around 30k, approximately 10,000 years ago from where canon is currently in the 41st millennium. Horus is found within a year, Russ within a few. From there, it only picks up steam, especially with Horus at the Emperor's side. So, Emps and his boys road trip across the galaxy. picking up lads and convincing them to get in the car as they go. Horus gets to ride shotgun, Magnus is on speakerphone with the Emperor the whole time, Roboute Guilliman's in the back seat with a map, Lorgar is kicking the Emperor's seat, Mortarion is locked in the trunk, Perturabo is sitting on the roof, and Angron is sitting in a desk chair holding onto a rope tied to the bumper. They campaign across the galaxy, bringing worlds into compliance. Compliance is the kindest word for what they did, which was conquer, crush, and girl boss their way across the stars. Now, the Emperor had a strictly enforced atheism policy, one that Lorgar continuously broke and the Emperor continuously whacked him over. By his own decree, the Emperor was not a god, he was a man, and humanity should only worship logic and science. He didn't want them to put their faith in gods of any kind. This was his solution to beating chaos and the ruinous powers. We'll get around to seeing how that worked out for him. Crucially, and here we get into ol' Empy Baby being Galaxy's worst dad, the Emperor did not tell his sons about the existence of the Chaos Gods and the ruinous powers. Literally didn't warn them. Except maybe Corvus, but we already touched on that. So they go off on this road trip, and Emps doesn't warn them that his bad exes are out there plotting on all of their downfalls, nor that Corrin looks real good in that low-cut dress and Zinch in those jean shorts. So, the first good chunk of the crusade goes great. There's enough seats in the car, the tunes are bumping, and the boys are getting along. Mostly. Lorgar finally kicked the seat enough that Empy got sick of it, whipped around, and told Lorgar off. Bad. Reached back, crushed his autism fidget toy and all. Roboute heard everything, and Lorgar was absolutely humiliated. Now, after a while, Emps gets bored and decides he wants to go home and work on his model train set, secret projects in the basement. He decides he will name a War Master to continue leading the crusade and free him up to go hang out with his husband, best friend and partner, Malkador, and do freaky nerd shit in his basement alone. Most of the boys want to hang out with Dad some more, and don't like the idea that one of them would get picked to be more special than the others. They quite like the we're all different but vaguely equal vibe with Emps in charge. Putting a brother in charge will harsh the vibe, and nobody wants that. However, Emps doesn't care, and he says, Horus has been riding shotgun and been here the longest, he can probably drive best. Lots of grumbling from the back seats, and Angron and Perturabo can vaguely be heard muffled yelling, "What? We can't hear you! What's everyone saying?" before Horus turns the radio up. Horus smiles smugly at his brothers, but promises to drive well, and the Emperor fucks off. Now, credit where credit's due. Horus does drive pretty well. The crusade continues, and Horus is a good enough leader that it moves in the right direction. And this is where the world's worst will make his entrance. There's this guy named Erebus. He's one of the word bearers and an advisor to Lorgar. Erebus knows about chaos. He knows about the ruinous powers, and he really likes the ruinous powers. Full Jehovah's Witness treatment on Lorgar's door. Lorgar, being someone who gets his rocks off being religiously dominated, but also on knowing stuff other people don't and feeling superior about it, is very interested in what Erebus is saying. Lorgar reads Erebus' special book and decides he wants to know more. They sit around and do Bible studies for a while, and this is going on in the background of the road trip. Lorgar does the old lean back to the window sideways when you open a snap, but because Lorgar is a square, it's just a different translation of the Bible. A bunch of the Primarchs, at pressure of the word bearers, start doing this thing called the Warrior Lodge. Basically, on all these massive battle cruisers, there's essentially Roman baths, and they're separated by rank or legion, etc. But the Warrior Lodge was the name of the bathhouse or sauna that they decided that anyone who entered left title, rank, accomplishments at the door, and they could sit as brothers, speaking freely. So the boys began talking. Actually talking. They would invite regular Marines to their bathhouse to talk and give advice and wisdom and criticism without fear of reprisal. Basically, it became a secret society of elite warriors. The Warrior Lodge was the space where Lorgar first began to drop small pieces of chaos knowledge, and it grew like black mold in the mind. With that foundational beginning, doing things differently than the Emperor instructed, with little pieces of doubt and free thinking planted in the minds, a tragedy happened. Horus was attacked. Horus took a crazy hit in a battle, getting stabbed with a violently poisoned knife. It was actually a demon blade of Nurgle, Mr. I Heart Disease and Plague. Yeah, he went septic basically instantly. Horus went down for the count in a coma. During this coma, he was approached by the Chaos Gods and came to know the eldritch truth. That the Emperor had used warp powers to make them, that he knew of chaos, and Horus had visions of the Emperor discarding his sons once he was done with them. His father, his beloved and loving father, had lied to him. And when Horus came to, who was standing over him but Lorgar and Erebus, with that fuck-ass grin and his big book of heresy. The Demon Blade, the Poison Strike, all had been orchestrated by the Word-Bearers to bring Horus to the Ruinous Powers as their champion, by the way. Horus became the champion of chaos, turned fully on his father, and would no longer serve. Horus lives the whole Anakin Skywalker arc. However, he is still War Master, and no one knows he's not serving the Imperium anymore. This is why I had to introduce you to everyone, because it's about to get complicated. Fun road trip is over. Horus just realized that the Emperor sent them out here to mule heroin across state lines, and he's straight edge. He's taking this car anywhere but where Dad said to go, because fuck that guy. But he knows Roboute has that bitch on speed dial, so he's gotta play this cool. Fuck. Does Roboute know? Was he in on it? What about Dorn? That brick wall could bark like a dog if Dad said to. Can't trust anyone. Lorgar, though. He had my back and told me I can trust him. So, Horus and 8 of the other Primarchs all turned to chaos. 9 and 9. Loyalist and traitor. For clarity, I'll list them here, but realize that at this moment in the story, it's all under wraps. The Warrior Lodge's groups of elite warriors are spreading this corruption through the ranks and fomenting rebellion. They also did not all fall at the same time. Some went immediately, the Word-Bearers, others only joined later after seeing how things shook out. Magnus. So the Loyalists are Lion and the Dark Angels, Khan and the White Scars, Leman Russ and the Space Wolves, Rogal Dorn and the Imperial Fists, Sanguinius and the Blood Angels, Ferrus Manus and the Iron Hands, Roboute Guilliman with the Ultramarines, Vulkan with the Salamanders, Corvus Corax with the Raven Guard. And for traitors, we have Fulgrim with the Emperor's Children, Perturabo with the Iron Warriors, Konrad Curze with the Night Lords, Angron of the World Eaters, Mortarion, Death Guard, Magnus, Thousand Sons, Horus with the Sons of Horus, Lorgar of the Word-Bearers, and Alpharius and Omegon with the Alpha Legion. Now let's talk about why. First, the burning of Prospero, also known as Magnus and the Big Fucky Wucky. Near the end of the Great Crusade, the Emperor held a massive council called the Council of Nicaea to decide the fate of psychers in the Imperium. Many arguments were heard, and eventually the Emperor judged that all psychers would be banned, the use of the powers outlawed and unsanctioned. Magnus and his sons, all being psychers, felt this was unfair and essentially withdrew from the crusade back to Prospero, Magnus's homeworld. While there, he learned of Horus' plan to betray the Emperor. Magnus knew he had to tell Dad that Horus had gone off the rails, but he didn't have time for the typical means of communication, and also low-key wanted to prove to his dad that he was powerful enough to use the warp powers and careful enough to do it well, So he did the psychic equivalent of taping his message to a wrecking ball and swung it across the galaxy towards Dad's window. Now, remember I said that ol' Emps had gone home to work on projects? The Emperor had actually been working very carefully on building a stable, safe portal and demon-free entry into the warp in the palace basement. And it was absolutely not ready for Magnus to smash through it, letting all these demons in behind him, standing dick in the breeze on the Emperor's hobby table, right on the fragments of humanity's great step forward, to give Dad bad news. Oh no, absolutely not. The Emperor was beyond pissed. He was downright fucking boiling. He told Magnus to fuck off. Actually, stay there. I'm sending my boy Leman Russ to fuck you up. I told you not to! The Emperor ordered Leman Russ, his executioner, to go grab Magnus by the balls and drag him back to Terra. But Horus got word of this and intercepted Russ. Russ, being a good dog, was unaware that Horus had begun to fall to chaos. Thinking him still loyal, he took Horus's orders as the word of the Emperor, as the War Master lied to his face. Horus told him that Dad said, "Actually, screw bringing Magnus back. Raise the planet and kill Magnus and his legion. Fuck him up." The Emperor could not go himself. Because of Magnus's actions, the Golden Throne, a massive piece of technology and the basis for the warp portal, had to be sat upon and held closed by the Emperor, as he was the only psyker powerful enough to keep it closed and save Terra from becoming a massive unprotected warp portal. Anyone weaker would be vaporized nigh instantly. It had actually been the plan, once completed, to offer the honor to Magnus to sit the throne and control the portal. Magnus, however, was a baby-back bitch and accepted his death with dignity, sitting by while his planet was destroyed. He would eventually join the battle after watching his soldiers defy his orders and fight back against Russ, who is slaughtering them. Magnus would end up dueling Russ and losing, getting his spine broken in the process. He and some survivors of his legion would make it out, ending up in chaos, specifically joining with Tzeentch at long last. Now the heresy truly begins here, at Isstvan III. This was the moment of no return. Up until now, it was all talk, but here it finally became action. Inescapable, open rebellion. Here we see them fight as the boys never have before. They've dueled, they've sparred, they've brawled, but they've never turned their full might against each other. But only from great love can such hate grow. Rivalries were settled on the battlefield, friendships were shattered, and lives were lost. This was the Great War, and none would escape unchanged. Horus and several other secret traitor legions arrived under the guise of putting down a rebellion. They sent down specially selected squads, entirely made up of the troops that the Primarchs knew would never join them in open rebellion. Once the loyalist troops from the traitor legions were on the ground, Horus and his fleet virus-bombed the planet, killing billions within minutes. The entirety of the population wiped out, and their loyalist battle brothers died betrayed. Horus and his gathered forces, the Sons of Horus, the World Eaters, Death Guard, and Emperor's Children, redeployed to Isstvan V, where he was met by 7 legions sent to bring him back to Terra to face the Emperor for what he had just done. This was the moment of the legendary Drop Site Massacre. 3 Primarchs and their legions, the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard, deployed first to Isstvan V, intending to face Horus and drag him back, knowing that they had 4 more legions waiting in orbit to reinforce them. However, unbeknownst to the Loyalists, the first 3, their reserve forces, the 4 in orbit, were traitors. The Night Lords, Iron Warriors, Wordbearers, and Alpha Legion. The Loyalists landed in the center of a kill box. weapons trained on them, mines surrounding them, and nowhere to hide. The traitor reinforcements dropped on top of them, and the trap snapped shut. It was a slaughter. Ferrus Manus fell nearly immediately, beheaded by Fulgrim, his best friend. Vulkan was captured, and Corvus, mortally wounded, escaped with a few battle brothers. The legions were slaughtered down to nearly a man, and functionally destroyed. This left the Imperium severely weakened in the face of Horus's assault. The last legions to join Horus joined now. Magnus and his 1,000 sons joined after the burning of Prospero. The traitors sped, hell-bent towards Terra. Smashing their way across the galaxy, they speared down toward their father, the one that had betrayed them, lied to them, used them, and planned to throw them aside once they had gained him his dreams. Rogal Dorn took over the defense plans of Terra and the Imperial Palace. The master of fortifications, Mr. Osha, brickwall himself to defend. Dorn has one of the best lines in the setting, as he delivers the final speech before the attack begins. This is from the novel The Lost and the Damned. Dorn himself spoke then, a message that went to every helm, vox bead, and address system in the palace. "The time for speeches is done," said Dorn. "The first great test is here. My order to you all is simple, yet heed it well and exert yourselves to see it done. They are coming. Kill them all." Perturabo, the Lord of Iron, the siege master, led the attack. The greatest rivalry of the Primarchs came to a head. The traitors landed like a sledgehammer, battering against the shields and Dorn's rockcrete fortress. Their cruisers dropped orbital bombardments, and the batteries returned fire. The masters of siege warfare began to crush and press, gaining step after step deeper into the fortress, paying in blood for every inch, but gaining that inch nonetheless. During the battle, Horus became increasingly erratic, even removing Perturabo from his position as siege master, giving it instead to Mortarion, despite his skill deficiencies in the matter. This greatly disillusioned Perturabo and his Iron Warriors, as that was exactly how the Emperor had treated them, and they quit the siege, leaving all together. During the final stages of the battle, the traitors had nearly taken the palace, even having captured Dorn's command center. They learned that Roboute Guilliman was approaching rapidly, mere hours away with massive reinforcements. Knowing this, Horus engaged in a daring gambit, lowering the shields on his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, inviting the Emperor to teleport aboard and attack him directly. The Emperor instructed his common-law husband and perpetual best friend Malcador the Sigillite, a man who'd been with him forever, to sit on the golden throne. Malcador went willingly, knowing the full forces of the ruinous powers awaited on the other side of the portal. Such a thing would turn him to ash, and he would last as long as he could to hold them off. Nodding solemnly, the Emperor turned his back on his friend as he began to scream in agony against the warp onslaught. The Emperor, Sanguinius, Rogal Dorn, and the Custodes teleported onto Horus's ship, but it was a trap, and they were all scattered throughout the ship with no way to communicate. Sanguinius arrived in the throne room first, pleading with his brother, his prince, but Horus was gone, hardly a shell of his former self. The ruinous powers corrupted him completely, their raw warp energy flowing through him. Horus rained crashing blows on his brother, his mace knocking Sanguinius to the floor. The great angel struggled to rise, his blood pouring from his torn wings, and his sword broken. The Emperor sped toward the throne room, smashing and crushing anyone in his way on his warpath. He arrived at the throne room too late, however, finding Sanguinius, his beloved son, dead on the floor at the feet of his first son. They flew at each other, dueling in great clashes, Horus berating his father for his betrayal and lack of trust in his sons, and the Emperor arguing that Horus can still rejoin him. The Emperor and Horus fought, but Horus was flooded with the strength of the ruinous powers, and he overpowered the defensive emperor. The emperor had been fighting as if he could still save Horus, and with a final look at his fallen son, the emperor broke. He fainted, leading Horus on with a killing strike and taking a mortal wound. The opportunity this granted gave the emperor the chance to unleash the full power of his psychic might, and the last of the warp power that he had stolen to create his sons in the first place, to disintegrate Horus and remove him from existence entirely. No soul, no body, no mind. Horus was gone, and the Grand Heresy was over. Mortally wounded, the emperor returned to the palace, finding Malcador reduced to dust on the throne, his soul finally allowing himself to die upon seeing his friend, the emperor, return to the throne. And there the emperor sits today, 10,000 years later, interred upon his golden throne. Part life support system, part psychic beacon, all torture. He is a mere skeleton, a corpse, a mummy, barely alive if at all, holding back the powers of the warp with all his remaining might, and he keeps the Astronomicon lit. The traitor legions scattered, most retreating to the warp and joining chaos in some fashion. Angron and his world eaters joined Khorne. Magnus and his 1,000 sons joined Tzeentch. Fulgrim and his emperor's children went to the embrace of Slaanesh, and Mortarion with his death guard joined Nurgle. The sons of Horus became the Black Legion under the command of Abaddon, now the Despoiler. Each of these Primarchs became demon princes. Angron, mid-duel with Roboute Guilliman on his home planet of Nuceria, where Angron was massacring the population that had enslaved him, and Guilliman attempted to stop him. He was transformed into a demon prince by Lorgar, using the hate and rage flowing from him. Fulgrim tricked Perturabo into being present for his ascension, draining Perturabo's life force to fuel his change into a demon prince. This did not kill Perturabo, but weakened him greatly. And that's roughly where we sit now. 10,000 years. There's a lot more. And there's also Xenos running around, breaking things and causing problems in the middle of all this. This is all just the story of the humans kicking the hell out of each other. Thank you for attending Warhammer 101. None of this will be on the test. Please go touch grass.